Welcome. I'm your host, Paula Scatoloni, the founder of Transformative Harmonics, a podcast that offers listeners a synthesis of ancient wisdom and modern science. Welcome back to another episode of Transformative Harmonics. I'm your host, Paula Scatoloni. Today, my guest is Carol Asiaghi. I met Carol in 2020 when I was beginning my own journey of understanding what it meant to open to the more complex domains of consciousness, to journey inwards, to work more shamanically. This was happening for me naturally, and I did not have a mentor or place to understand what was happening in my body and my mind and with my clients. Carol is a traditional shamanic practitioner, and so I undertook a year of mentorship under her tutelage, but also was introduced to a pathway that for me was very familiar through some very well-known people in Hawaii. And so a lot of this was a recollection and remembrance of what it meant to be connected through the history within ourselves as healers. And so many of us are waking up to what that means. Like there's a deep history within us. And so we're kind of going through the motions of that remembrance at different levels. And so Carol and this path for me, through that Hawaiian framework, was my pathway back to remembering. Carol Asiaghi is a shamanic practitioner, interfaith minister, and inner spiritual counselor whose path bridges decades of spiritual study, sacred service, and healing work, while spending 30 years as a textile designer and an innovator in New York's fashion industry. She was also deeply engaged in the study of shamanism and spirituality. Carol began studying with Hank Wesselman and Jill Kuykendall in Hawaii in 1998, returning for years of direct learning, and also had the privilege of receiving teachings directly from Hale Makua. Today, she offers soul retrieval and counseling work in Asheville, North Carolina, and teaches both online and in person. I hope this episode for you gives perspective on what it means to return to our roots, what it means to be on a path of remembrance, and also what it means to be in integrity with the work itself. I'll see you on the other side. Hello, listeners. Welcome back to another episode of Transformative Harmonics. I am your guest, Paula Scatoloni. Before we begin today, as usual, I'd like to invite you to take a moment to slow down. The guests that I bring here have so much wisdom. It's almost impossible to put it into the 45-minute or the hour. But we know that when we're in a state of receptivity, we can hear the message, we can feel the resonance of their voice, and we can tune into what this deeper message is on multiple levels that they're giving us. So just take a moment before we begin to do that, and we'll do that as well. Today, my guest is Carol. Is it Asiaghi?
Asiaghi.
Asiaghi. I'll have to ask you the origins of that. Asiaghi.
It's Italian. I can just quickly
it's Italian,
say,
of course.
Like the cheese.
Of course.
Of course. It's my husband's name.
Beautiful. Okay. Well, I'm here with Carol, who I have known, we were just chatting, since 2000, maybe 19 or 20 was when we crossed paths. And Carol came to me by a referral, someone who I trusted, a body worker in the community who is also a shaman in disguise herself. And I had just had a massive third eye opening, and I was seeing other dimensions. I was traveling astrally with my clients, and I really thought I was having a nervous breakdown. So she said, there's someone in Asheville who's the real deal, and you need to give Carol a call. So that was the beginning of my shamanic practitioner journey. And we began the process of learning what that means to stand between the two worlds. So I feel like coming back to you is the beginning for me, having you here to talk about what it is, your journey, and the gifts that you brought me along the way as I came to know myself through the process of journeying, because it really is, you are taking the journey yourself. It's not a teacher telling you who you are, right? You're discovering yourself. So I just thought it was a beautiful time. You're also the person who told me about the book, The Women of Lemuria. And so it just, my whole life exploded at that time. And so this just feels so important at this time as the school is launching, as you're coming on as one of the faculty of the school, to bring you in and anchor this all together. So thank you for coming.
My pleasure, my honor. And I would say that was what we would call an authentic initiation that you had, Paula. And that's what happens when you step into the higher realms of spiritual awakening and awareness, is you keep getting initiated. And if you keep saying yes, it'll keep happening, right? So I just wanted to, because we were talking before about shamans being everywhere. They're almost like realtors now, right? So everyone's becoming a shaman, not a realtor. Actually, in the tradition I've studied, and I can talk a little more about this, you don't call yourself a shaman. So that's a big red flag. If anyone's out there saying they're a shaman, that's not the person you want to see, because they're not in humility. However, if Paula, you call me your shaman, then I'm your shaman. So if I've offered healing and support and shifting for you, then that would be appropriate. And what those of us who are on this path as that resonate with shamanism will say we're shamanic practitioners. And we're also always students, right? So we're learning and growing. And I think the most exciting and empowering aspect of shamanism as a path is it requires the participant to have their own direct revelations. And this was a phrase my teacher, Hank Wesselman, talked about. And when you have your own direct experience with the divine, with the helping spirits on the other side, you know it in your body. And when you know something, even if you deny it for 10 years, you can't forget it. So that was part of my own personal experience. And I can go into a little of my story here if you want to.
Yes, I do. I think it was a beautiful way to start because it sets the tone of the spiritual renaissance that so many people are in, and keeps us in integrity when we set the tone that this is a path of initiation. It's a process of your own self-discovery. It's not people imparting wisdom per se. It's you finding that wisdom from within yourself and then honoring the practices that teach us how to be in right, in balance, in pono with all. Yeah. So let's start with a little about your story, because you come from 27 years in the fashion industry.
Yes.
And then you had your initiation. So let's start there, just so people can get to know you a little, and then we'll go on from there.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I think that's important to acknowledge about light workers, we could call ourselves light workers, right? Is that we often feel very lonely until we start getting initiated. And that loneliness can start around 5 or 7 when you start getting talked out of your magic, right? We came in knowing a lot. Then you get indoctrinated into school or church or, a religion or a family. Your mind comes online. You start creating stories about the experiences you have, and you stop seeing people sitting at the end of your bed. And then something happens where you feel that pull or that draw. And so my story actually started when I was in my 20s, 27 or so. I was reading Seth Speaks. And I went to visit a college friend up in Juneau, Alaska. And it was like Northern exposure. She introduced me to this guy who had a jazz radio show, and she was working at the radio station. And she didn't know that he was an Eskimo medicine man. He's a Tinglet. And he took one look at me, Main Street, Juneau, and said, I have to have ceremony for you. And I said, oh my gosh, like, what does this cost? Or, I thought, being a New Yorker, I thought it was like suspicious. And then he called on Monday and said, tell your friend to start fasting. And he taught me how Native people pray. And at the end of that initiation, that ceremony, I said to him, I had been seeing feathers in Brooklyn. I lived in Brooklyn. Every day when I walked to the subway, they were under my feet. And I said, could I go down to the ocean and find a feather to commemorate this experience with you? And he picked up his eagle feathers that his medicine man gave him. And he said, these are yours. And you can go to any ceremony in North America of Native American people. And when the medicine men stand up, you stand up too. So, of course, I did not do that, being a Westerner. But what happened, and this is also not uncommon, is about 5 years later, in my mid-30s, I got chronic fatigue. And this is also like a telltale soul loss. That's what we could call that, soul loss. But I knew that I had to start understanding what he saw in me and what I kind of felt in my heart. So I went into a bookstore and I said a prayer. And what book should I read? And it was Hank Wesselman's Spirit Walker. And when I started reading the book, I heard a voice inside my head saying, this is your friend. You will be friends. And I thought, how is that possible? But when you hear a voice that you don't generate, you have to listen to it. So what happened to me was I started to experience having what I thought was like an imaginary friend. I saw in my third eye, or in my mind's eye, a man, a very tall man with long black hair down his back, empty, no top, and a red skirt. And I could, because I was a designer, I could even draw the pattern, and I have. And he started walking with me to the subway. So like you said, you either think you're losing your mind or you lean in. And one day he was standing in front of me on the train. And I said, what is your name? And he said, Immovable Strength. So I didn't know at the time, but this is what the Hawaiians call the Hale Makua, my immortal oversoul speaking to me. So I wrote to Hank, and this was, of course, before computers, and I just said how much I loved his book and was he teaching, and they wrote right back that they were teaching in Hawaii. And I was unemployed and single. I thought, what the heck? So I went out to Hawaii. This is like 1998. And what happened, I don't know if I've shared this whole story or not, but Hank came. We were in houses, and Hank came, and I was so happy to meet him. And again, I heard this voice inside my head saying, your life will never be the same again. So I woke up early, having jet lag the next day, and Hank had said, we have a big treat. We have a kahuna nui coming. That means a big kahuna, a big medicine man, tomorrow morning, the first day of my first class ever. And up until then, I had a power animal. I knew enough to do that. I had taken classes in New York through the Foundation of Shamanic Studies. And I woke up early the next morning, and I called in my eagle, the power animal. And when I lifted my arms to feel the eagle, I felt that man who I said I knew it was inappropriate, but I called him Big Red because he had a red skirt. I felt Big Red come into my body. And I've never felt that since. I felt like I was a man. I could feel the hair down my back. I felt like I had the genitals. I felt completely embodied. And the day before, I was at a hotel and I saw the pattern on his skirt and Hawaiian quilt. So I thought, oh, Big Red's Hawaiian. All the pieces start to come in. And then that morning, he was in me the whole time. And Hale Makua, the Hawaiian elder, who was a direct descendant of King Kamehameha and Chief Kiowa, was there in Hank's group. And he later told me he recognized me the minute I walked in. And when I asked him at the lunch break what was happening to me, he said, that's your Makua. So the Makua, as an expression in the Hawaiian tradition, is our eternal self. Our immortal oversoul is a hologram for everything we have been and everything we will be. And that was my Hawaiian past life, making itself known so that I would remember, so Makua would remember. And that did change my life. I went out to Hawaii every year for 5 years. While I was working at Liz Claiborne, I became an interfaith minister and worked at the United Nations on the weekends. I felt the call to step into my spiritual self. And one of the things I want to say, I was very blessed to have a relationship with Hale Makua himself. And Hank has written a beautiful book called The Bowl of Light, which is all about Hale Makua's teachings. But this is innate in all of us. So we call it shamanism, but it's a tool. And in the Western culture, those of us who are not originally indigenous, somewhere, if we go far enough back, we all lived in communion with the earth. We all communicated with the unseen beings on the other side of the veil. And most of us who are Western have learned from anthropologists, but occasionally we have the great benefit, gift, and joy to meet indigenous people and learn from them, the wisdom keepers. But it is our birthright. We are wired to be able to communicate with each other and communicate with helping spirits, our ancestors, and all of nature. And we shouldn't back away from that just because we're not indigenous ourselves. But we approach it with respect and humility and discipline, as you're saying before we got on the call here. And Hale Makua would say, love all that you see with humility, live all that you feel with reverence, and know all that you possess with discipline. And then he would always end with, and that includes what possesses you.
Yes, yes. He also called this the school of hard knocks, which I remember that when I'm in the middle of whatever it is I'm trying to, heal from still. Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful. So that got me on a path. But, as Hank used to say, you have to do your survivor dance and your spiritual dance when you can. And I had to do my survivor dance. But what actually happened, and I'm only just sharing this, not really to scare people, but just to say, you think you're doing everything right and you get thrown a curveball, is the last workshop I went to in 2003. I had graduated from seminary. I was working full time as a senior designer at Liz Claiborne, traveling around the world. I got very sick out in Hawaii. And I got a parasite that went undiagnosed for a long time. And I actually got hit with an entity because I was leaving my body and not knowing how to come back yet. And it took me like 2 years to recover from this experience. But then my life dramatically took off. But, you have kind of these ebbs and flows. And if you can help yourself to get help, and, we can do a lot of self-healing, but there's times when we really need healers. And
Yes.
coming back out of that, meeting my husband, the love of my life, getting married at 44. And then we moved down to Asheville, North Carolina when I was 52. And that was 10 years ago. And I thought, okay, now it's my time. Now it's my time to be able to see clients, to step into this work in a way that it's my life. It's what I love. And now I really have the distinct pleasure of training people. And Paula, you got me. You were like, okay, that was a great session. Now I want to learn how to do what you do. And I love that the most, because that's what we need to be doing, is empowering each other. And in indigenous wisdom, we're meant to be powerful. We're meant to have fully developed egos. We're meant to know who we are and where we are.
Where are you on your path? Yeah. And all the wisdom, there's the wisdom that helps you to get to your wisdom is how I'm thinking about it now, right? Because once you get to your wisdom, if you are meant to be using your spiritual gifts for healing others, then your inner team actually runs the show with whatever medicine you bring. And that's part of the path is discovering your medicine, because it's going to be different for everyone. But it is a path. There's so many waking up to this call, knock on the door, that's saying you actually are not meant to be talking psychotherapist right now, or a teacher right now, or whatever it is that they're doing, that there's something else that your oversoul it can do, and you are meant to come and awaken that at this point. And so finding the places of which your program is to wake this up in a way that's safe, trauma-informed, and grounded.
Yes, and I 100% agree with that. I mean, I've had young clients come to me after ayahuasca or ketamine who are disassociated, who are out of their body, because the practitioner, most of us who are spiritual or spiritual leaning, we know how to leave our bodies. We don't know how to come back. And that's the discipline. And that's being with someone who's trained to bring you in and out. And to do this safely, as you're saying, and you can journey, is what we call it, when we go into expanded states of perception and awareness, and be very grounded.
Yes.
And that's the only way, actually, we're going to make the shift. We're not going to make the shift just going into la la land. We have to make the shift by bringing it into reality, spiritual activism, and being kind to ourselves and others, and really standing up for when things are wrong. I believe that.
Using our voice.
Yeah. Yes. And then letting things evolve. So, I'm 62. I learned from Hank Wesselman, mostly Sandra Ingerman. I've learned some of the Alberto Villoldo. None of those people are particularly indigenous, but they learned. I mean, Alberto Villoldo has Latino blood in him, but he wasn't raised, living with shamans, but he studied them and then brought all this wisdom to us Westerners. But when I work with young people, I say, let this evolve in you, because your greatest teacher is your higher self. And most of these traditions are oral for many reasons, but one reason is they're meant to evolve. And oral traditions evolve to storytelling of the day, things that are relevant. We're not shepherds hardly anymore, And anyway, that whole book was edited for political gain. But it's important that, like Buddhism, insight meditation has helped so many people. That's based in Buddhism. Buddhism is a path, not necessarily a religion. It has become a religion. And culturally, shamanism is a religion, or not a religion, but I'd say a spiritual practice in indigenous cultures. And they all have their own way. So we're meant to keep evolving and let this evolve while we expand our awareness and become cognizant of the support all around us.
And we will be drawn towards the practices that are we already have an affiliation with, such as, you're being, the fact that we ended up together and we have that connection from Hawaii is like, it's already in you if you keep following the impulse towards, so you may get drawn to different things, but so you're leading yourself into your awakened state.
Yeah, as Makua would say, you say yes, keep saying yes. And if you say no, well, you haven't learned your lessons yet, and that's okay.
Yes.
And just interesting what you're saying about Hawaii. I had an amazing, weekend with Hale Makua, where I wrote to him and asked for a private audience. I had never done that before. This was in 2002. And he wrote me back and said, the ancestors tell me to give you the nickel tour of Oahu. If it pleases you, I'll pick you up on Thursday from Honolulu International Airport. And then you can go to Hank Wesselman's class on Sunday. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to wear? What's going to happen? And it was really phenomenal. And I can talk a little bit about this, but the funny thing is when we drove by Waikiki and the high rises, he says, you see all these high rises? Everybody's coming home.
Mm.
So, we could kind of go down a rabbit hole of Lemuria and the soul's spirituality becoming humanized. And when maybe that happened, which was a long time ago, but he gave me an authentic initiation. He took me to sacred sites. I mean, he drove me into a pineapple field where women gave birth to the kings. You know where that is?
Yes.
In Oahu? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I started having contractions.
Mm.
And he said, okay, perform ceremony. All I had was my little rattle. And I just went for it. I just thought, okay, this is, you can't play small.
Yeah. Just let it come through you.
Yes. And that's the other thing is so many people are afraid. And I say, I was in Brooklyn most of my life and I would, pretend to dance around a school as a power animal in my studio apartment. You just got to go for it. We've all probably been alive thousands of times and we're remembering for a reason.
But what I find is what my guides keep saying is take your hands off the steering wheel. But then there's what will the culture think, especially with songs and languages and energies, right, moving through you. And I think that many of us are moving through this fundamental state of fear that is in our bones, in our blood, from times of which it did not go very well when we came forward with the practices of connecting to the unseen world and knowing our God self and empowering ourselves with that truth from inside. And so there's trauma memory in the bloodline.
Oh, both. Even just my mother, you usually inherit this gift. And my father would always say, oh, those are all her old wives' tales. If a crow would fly to the window, someone had died and all these things. And my mother was highly psychic and intuitive. But that generation, when you suppress it, you really only get messages when something very traumatic does happen, like someone dies. And then, so bloodline, yes. And also spiritual line, past lives. And you can have a bleed through or a memory or a feeling of being burned at the stake. And, that's not fabricated. That's real. We know these things really happened. But what's interesting, and even if it's not, let's say, your personal past lives, whatever you think of it, we have a collective human consciousness where you can access this information. And if you're sensitive, you do access that information. But the truth about right now is there are more spiritual people than there's ever been. It actually is safer because here we are broadcasting. And what we're seeing is the end of a civilization. So we are the midwives bringing us into the new Renaissance. And it must evolve in this way. And we were talking about non-duality, non-polarity. Well, the tradition says that the Creator split itself in two in order to evolve itself. So, Makua always used to say we need friction. Friction helps us grow. But we can't be afraid. The other thing he'd say, when fear moves in, love moves out. So we have to kind of check ourselves like, wow, hundreds of people are going to Omega Institute and Esalen and coming to these podcasts. And I think it is a time of discernment, but there's also a time to own our own sovereignty in spirit and to make this known. And that's the spiritual warrior. The time of really killing people is over. I mean, it isn't over in real life, but energetically it's over. And when we can shift, there's another expression in Hawaiian that it's called like Indra's net. We're all on an aka cord. That's like we're all little knots on a fishing net. We don't have to have everybody stepping up. We just have to have enough of us that pull the net up.
Yes. So that comes back to that choice. Are you having a knock at the door? And if you don't heed that knock, or if you fight it, or if you grip against it, because it is a dismantling, then, that's when physical symptoms can happen. I have a lot of people in my groups that are running around from doctor to doctor. I have tinnitus and I have vertigo and I have this, and as if these are like separate things that are happening to them, and not seeing that they're in the middle of an initiation and that they're being asked to surrender.
Yes. And this is where us older, wiser women who've been through it can support those, and even of our age and even older. But, if we've been through it and we've survived it, what happened was Hale Makua took me to all the sacred sites of Oahu. I got sick. I couldn't get off the island. I literally sat in planes that broke down. I got off. The whole eastern seaboard went out of electricity when I was flying. I don't know if you remember that, 2003, from New York to Washington. I'm not saying I did it, but and I lost my job. I lost everything. I was 39 years old, but he had taken me. This is a crazy story. It was blowing my mind being with him. It was like being with a God, Jesus, the best father I could have ever had. And I loved him very much. I still do. But he took me to see a psychic because I was still single and I still wanted to be in a relationship. That whole silly story. And this psychic channeled Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the man who wrote Sherlock Holmes. And I'd never experienced a channel before. And I could see that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's face superimposed on this man's face. And he said, I'm part of a council of elders in the spiritual realm who help people. And if you will allow, we will access all of your negative belief systems and he gave me 33 affirmations to re-record in my own voice, because he said that affirmations only work when you hear it in your own voice. And it did. It worked. I did this, and it was remarkable because then one of them was, I will come to understand the meaning of true love, and it was well worth waiting for. Is my holistic doctor who helped me recover from the parasite, I had adrenal exhaustion, all this other stuff, introduced me to my husband.
You never know, or one step's going to lead you to the next.
Yes.
Right.
And I wouldn't have met him if I hadn't been sick.
Yeah.
But it was hell. But, this is life. This is life.
Why else would we come here? Yeah. No, I love it.
It's very dense. Yeah.
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 Beautiful. Well, let's talk. So lately, and those in my community know that we actually did a ceremony on my land at my house last month, because there was a group of my guides of another culture, more indigenous culture, that had been sitting with their hands crossed, tapping their feet, and
when is he going to get on board here?
Yeah, like, what are you doing? What are you messing with? You have something else. So I'm slowly listening into what that is about. I'm in the South. There is a lot of density, and you are too. And you had Hurricane Alina, where you were, and so let's talk a little bit about land and healing land, or just what your thoughts are and what you're doing, if you're doing anything with that or helping people, or.
Well, to me, there's two issues. There's one is the ancestors who lived on the land we live on. So where I live in Asheville, in the Appalachian Mountains, it's Cherokee. And we deserve to honor them whenever we call in benevolent healing spirits, whenever we drum, whenever we do ceremony, whenever we're in meditation, because we're on their land. What was their land? Mother Earth, in some ways, is in crisis. But I'll share with you, my journey suddenly took a dramatic shift about a month ago. And what I had access to was the recreation of Mother Earth. And it scared me. But some mystics are seeing and believing that she has already recreated an energetic form. And when people say things, when we had our hurricane here, the wrath of Mother Earth, that's not a wrath. That's her licking her wounds. That's a reaction. So offering gratitude and healing for places that we've misused, abandoned our connection. I mean, we lost hundreds of thousands of at least 200 or older year-old trees here. They're all growing mushrooms. I see them because I take my dog out all the time. It's the change, and my belief is that she's recreating herself based on what I'm seeing in my journey state. My visions, I just led a group last weekend into journeys into our immortal oversoul and the future. And this is going to pass. That's the feeling. Mother Earth is not going to go away. We might go away. So I think offering gratitude about our relationship. We've gotten very disconnected from our relationship. And there's so many elements to that relationship. Giving gratitude to oxygen, gravity, all the food, everything that serves us. When we had our hurricane, we didn't have water for months. Not having water will wake you up. We had to go to a creek and get water out of the creek. So, that's, how do you react to what I'm saying? I'm curious.
Yes, and yes. I feel, well, when we did our land healing, there was a lot of grief. Number one, about the disconnection and the lack of acknowledgement of the sentience of the trees so our ability to be able to feel the grief and acknowledge our part as humans. So you were representing the human race, right? People say, I didn't do that. And it's like, well, you're representing the human race. So we're processing that grief through our own bodies. And then there's the story of the land itself, how it was used, who had lived on it, who died on it, and the lack of consent. When you're building structures or when you're using pieces, it's about consent and asking permission and gratitude. And so all of that was what was getting processed on just my property is where we were, to come into Pono, to come into right relationship again. And then opening that door to conversation and acknowledgement each day, waking up. Hello, I greet you. And I'm in relationship with you. So that feels like a pivotal piece of the collective shift, is recognizing how much that we're so primed for survival that we aren't in more of a parasympathetic state where we can feel our relationship with what's around us. We're like siloed, right? In our mind and in survival, in independence rather than interdependence. So there's a physiological shift coming out of that defensive state of sympathetic charge and what we might call that more masculine prone energy into more of the yin, the receptive, which creates that spaciousness and that ability to feel the connection with things that aren't us. And so that's our mastery of what we're coming back to learn how to do.
Yeah. So after the hurricane, I have a very active dog. There was one place still open called Bent Creek, and it's the cradle of forestry, experimental forest. And there were so many trees down. And it was so heartbreaking. It was just, it was like walking through a war site. That's what it looked like. And I started singing to them. I started singing the Ho'oponopono prayer. And I don't know that it's a song, but I know that singing has a higher vibration than speaking. So I just sang, I'm sorry, please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. To all the trees. And I touched as many as I could. I would kiss them. And I just kept singing every time I would walk through to ask for their forgiveness of our ignorance, to think that we're not connected to them and that they're not connected to us. And then little by little, I think it got lighter for me. So I think you're right about that. It's really the reverence for where we're able to live. I mean, it's the most beautiful planet that we know. We chose it for a reason. And I think it doesn't take a lot of time or attention to show a little gratitude. And then your heart lifts, you can kind of feel it. And magic starts to happen. You see an owl or a crow start singing back with you. I mean, it's amazing how it doesn't take a lot to shift into that magical realm of communion.
And I want to make sure that those that are listening hear this piece, because again, people may say, oh, that's just serendipitous, or, oh, but it is the magic. And it's happening because of your vibration, your state, your frequency. So pay attention to your frequency.
And I'm accused of this too. How many times do we walk just looking down?
Yes.
So just look up and see what's there.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, let me see if we've covered everything. I feel, I know one more thing I wanted to cover. If you have any thoughts about this. So one of the things in our program the premise, the foundation is the idea of coming back to heal in community, which is a more tribal. It's in our roots. It's in our roots. We didn't, part of our Western world and the shift, it is part of decolonializing therapy and healing.
Oh,
because
I love that. Yeah.
We're siloed to be one-on-one, sitting across, and then somebody else has the power, and then they have the answers, and they have this book, and it's a diagnostic book, and then they give you it's just like, wow. So I don't use any of that anymore. I don't practice as a psychotherapist. I practice as a spiritual counselor and coach, but I have a lot of therapists in my programs. But it is this idea of healing in community and sacred circle and what it means to share the responsibility of where we're at and to heal together, and what happens when we bring people together in community to heal.
I think it's the most powerful kind of healing. And again, Hale Makua would say, we all decided before we were ever born that we were going to come together and do all this. This is definitely, I mean, not to bash anything, but capitalism has separated us because it is a false belief that you can succeed on your own when we never really do succeed on our own. And the joy of coming together and letting everyone's higher intelligence and divinity, their own higher self, inform a group elevates all of us. So in the shamanic principles, there's really 4 kinds of healing. The first one is empowerment. The first way to empower someone is to see them. Hale Makua would say the positive polarity of a spiritual experience is validation. And that's the positive polarity of therapy. You get a chance to reveal your unseen stories and be validated. And then you need to transcend them, not stay in them, right? So, and that empowers us. And I've said some crazy things to people like, you flew into your family on a spaceship from another planet. And I don't even know what that means. And the person will say, oh my God, I always felt like that. I'm like, good. Okay. So that's out of the way. And this is what we need. We need to hear each other's stories and witness them. And I actually just read something the other day about how not being seen is kind of like this hidden trauma, not being seen as a child and things. The second kind of kind of healing is soul loss. Yeah. So soul loss from this tradition is when we energetically get stuck out of trauma or perceived trauma, but we can have collective soul loss. Collective soul loss during COVID. I didn't have that, but because I liked the downtime and I was safe and protected, a lot of people did have it. People are having collective soul loss, doom scrolling. Right? This is a hook. What's happening? And a trickster. It's a trickster energy. So when we can come back and be in circle, we remember who we are, and our soul parts can show up. The third kind of healing is extraction, removing unwanted energy. We're a culture of codependency. We're not a culture of self-sovereignty. Not yet. People who live tribally, there's an expression in Hawaiian, kuleana. That means your responsibility and your gift. And traditionally, and I've learned all this from Hale Makua, I'm not saying I lived it, I've learned it, that before a child was born, the parents would ask an elder to speak to the baby and ask what its responsibility is. What's its kuleana? What is it meant to fulfill in this lifetime? And they would name the baby accordingly. Hale Makua, Holy Father. That's how that translates. So, if we can uncouple from feeling this need to make sure everyone's okay all the time and that we're not okay unless they're okay, we're constantly putting our energy in other people, taking other people's energy. And it's really okay to be a self-aware unit. And then you can meet. Otherwise, you really can't meet. And the last one is ancestral healing. So we've all inherited energies of, and I really see them as distorted belief systems. We never had enough money. Things like this family doesn't do that. In the South, I've had a lot of young people who are raised Baptist who are gay. And that tradition, that ancestral distortion, that one way is right and not the other way. We're, as Makua would say, we have to walk our ancestors' footprints in reverse and make ho'oponopono, which means make the right right. So we're also doing that right now. We're also doing that. And when we can be in community, we have that support of experiencing some of these very deep wounds that the last generation before did not talk about.
And some of those wounds, in my exploration, are collective wounds that shape the way we were raised and what was expected of us or allowed in terms of how we moved into our gifts, found our voice, claimed our power, depending on your gender. So there's the story of the person, and then there's a story of the inherited collective belief system. So feeling into that thread and attending to that thread is where a lot of our work is.
And this is beautiful that you're having the courage to create this. I know it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, I don't know if there's some days I wake up and say, what did I sign up for?
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, I'm sure I signed up for this. But, you get so far in, it's like you can't go back because the person you were doesn't exist.
Exactly. And then
like,
you can't just sit and have small talk anymore, right?
No.
You can't bullshit.
No. And then I'm at a point where it's confusing if we're not authentic about what this is and what's happening. So I'm trying to pull together, and this conversation helps because the more accurate we can get within ourselves of this is why I'm here, this is my mission. And it might sound crazy to some people, right? That there's these Lemurian grandmothers speaking through me, and that might not be in the construct of someone's psyche to understand what that is, but it's here because it's ready to be birthed. And so how do we take our hands off the steering wheel and just allow the who we are from the inside to move into co-create with the world at this time as we create that new version.
I just found a video recently of Hale Makua. He was part of an indigenous leaders group. And so it's from 2002, I think. And he said, how do we create sovereignty? By sharing. When we get to the place of sharing, then we become sovereign. Like our cup is full. And we're seekers, and we're always going to be seekers. And that's what's fun about this, right? That's what hooks you. You just want to keep going. And I have visions and glimpses of us living in a more aware state. I mean, there's so much one of the things that's emerged, and I'll just kind of end with this, and I call it shamanic mediumship, is now every session I have an ancestor come through. And I mean, like, sometimes I describe what they wore in their picture at Ellis Island, I mean, they are right here. And more, and this is more in the woo-woo category, I'm seeing the gods are coming back. And they're telling me, you need help. We're here to help.
Yeah,
yes.
The forces are all activated. Because we're in dire states.
We are.
So I say, well, we can have let's bring it on. Bring on all the help we can get at this point. So if you're listening and you're a light worker and you're getting that knock, there are so many authentic people, teachers, space holders who are in integrity, like Carol, and all the faculty, I think, in our program. They're all in integrity. They're in their bodies. They're not bypassing. And I invite you to come and spend time if you're getting that knock at your door. And it's been such a pleasure, Carol, feels like we've summed up a lot of the journey that I was on since 2019. So I appreciate it.
And I just want to add, if you're listening, you are a light worker. Let's just cut to the chase. Come on, get with the program.
Yeah, really, really. Very good. Well, thank you, Carol. Let's end with,
beautiful.
We'll put some of the books in the show notes that you've mentioned, Hank's book, Hale Makua's story. And then what is your website so people can find you?
Oh, it's my name, carolasiaghi.com, and that's ASIAGHI. So it's CarolAsiaghi.com.
So I invite everyone listening to visit Carol's website, learn about her, meet her in our school as one of our faculty, and stay connected to us for more information about this beautiful journey that we're on.
Thank you. This is exciting. We needed this catch up anyway.
We did. Great. Well, thank you, listeners, for spending time with us. And thank you, Carol.
All right.
Thank you for being a part of the Transformative Harmonics podcast. If this discussion resonated with you, please subscribe, share the episode, or write a review. This helps to support the expanding community around embodiment, sound, and conscious living. You can visit Transformative Harmonics at paulascatoloni.com to find out more about my work, forthcoming classes, and the Transformative Harmonics Academy. You can also reach out and connect with me on Instagram. My handle is at Paula Scatoloni. I write regularly on Substack at Signature Frequency Living. Until next time, take good care, and thank you for being part of the journey.